Hi everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism and narcissistic relationships. So some of you, many of you, likely grew up in a household characterized by a marriage with at least one narcissistic parent. And so you had most likely, heaven help those who had grew up with two narcissistic parents. I have to believe that there's some special place and that I'd like to think that something joyful will happen to fix all that, because that's a mess. But many, and the modal issue is that most people have one narcissistic relationship and one parent who's not. Here's the question I've been getting from more than a few viewers who've asked, what the hell am I supposed to do about this when I'm an adult? So let's take that on. So it's a funny burden to have to carry when you had one narcissistic parent, one parent who wasn't a narcissist. What do you do? I mean, it was bad enough when you were a kid. What do you do as an adult? So this is such a tough question. I actually sat on this question for a few months before I made this video, because there's such a range of reactions people have to this situation, and that would have bearing on what people will do as the adult children in these situations. So basically the situation is that your parent is still married. They're staying in that relationship. So it is like watching a person die on the vine, or at least enable on the vine. So let's talk about the versions of this. Again, these parents are still married to each other, okay? There's the person whose parents stayed, and the parent who stayed is a decent person, a good person who did their best, who loved you, who tried their best to protect you, but for whatever their reasons were, generational, money, culture, religion, fear, they never left. Second scenario is the person whose non-narcissistic parent stayed, but was completely detached when you were a child. Your narcissistic parent would rage at all of you, but the parent, your non-narcissistic parent, didn't even try. They may have even just gone along to get along, and for the same reasons as above, they may have stayed in the relationship. The third version of this is the person whose non-narcissistic parent, who literally didn't see it, and may have been the narcissistic parent's chief enabler, saying nonsense like, your parent loves you, or you're being ungrateful. They were basically playing Iago to your narcissistic parent's Othello. And then, obviously, there is the person who has two. Their parents stay together and both parents are narcissistic. Like I said, heaven help you. So they have been literally a co-perpetrator of narcissistic abuse. But I don't think that's what the question I've been getting is about. So let's start with the first one. I think in some ways this is the hardest one when you're the adult child. The loving, decent parent who stayed, who did their best in an atrocious circumstance. Like I said, this may be the most difficult of all because you care about them. You can see the cumulative suffering your parent has experienced. You may even have survivor guilt if you moved away as early as you could and stepped away from the situation. You may have tried to encourage your non-narcissistic parent to leave 1,000 times. You may have offered to help them to leave, told them they could stay with you, offered them money. You may keep trying to point out how awful your narcissistic parent is, and they may even agree with you. But whatever those ties that bind, and they are tight, culture and religion may be at play, and that may even frustrate you as well. But at some point, you'd have to give in to that radical acceptance that everyone has their path to follow. The challenge is if it's not a cultural issue, but money, and you offer money and support, they still stay. That's when it seems like something else is keeping them in this toxic relationship. Remember that people who survive long-term narcissistically abusive marriages are often quite trauma bonded. So even if they can articulate what was wrong, that doesn't mean that they will leave. Aging doesn't help, and duty and an obligation may leave your non-narcissistic parent feel as though they're now stuck after a certain age. So what do you do as the adult child? Therapy, as much as you can get into, because many people feel tremendous guilt and tremendous grief in these situations. You may be experiencing a complex mix of emotions, not just guilt and grief, but also anger and disappointment. You may wish that they did leave and salvage your childhood. However, you may also have warm feelings toward this parent, and at best, all you may be able to do is just be there for them, even if they don't leave. Some people can't watch the mess of their narcissistic parents' marriage with the non-narcissistic parent and step away, which, by the way, is okay. Over time, the grief of witnessing this may be too overwhelming. If you can give up on the hope of them leaving and then being there and staying in touch in whatever way that feels comfortable, maybe sometimes giving your long beleaguered parent some pleasant experience, a grandchild visit or a trip or taking them out, that might make a difference. You won't be the one to convince them to leave, so stop trying. It's exhausting both of you. The second scenario, with those of you who had the detached parent, who was not narcissistic but detached, that's more complicated. You may have felt very abandoned by this parent as a child, and as the narcissistic parent raged around you, the other parent was completely psychologically absent, which often left you feeling unsafe. That non-narcissistic parent may have made the meals, gone to work, come home at night, kept the house running, whatever their role was. But for some survivors, the anger that the non-narcissistic parent in this case just mentally checked out while the rage of the narcissistic parent was spinning around can be hard to get past, even if you understand it. As an adult, you may be able to frame the detached parent's conduct as a trauma response, especially if the narcissistic abuse was bad. But that said, it also made your childhood much worse. In these cases, it may be harder to reach back in. You may still deeply pity your parent who's stuck in that narcissistic marriage. You may feel you want to help them in ways you can. But given the detachment, it may be much harder than those who had a loving relationship with that non-narcissistic parent. And even practical factors like culture or religion or money, even when those aren't at play, folks who have this detached traumatic response from long-term exposure to this relationship, the grief can be overwhelming for you as you witness it keep happening. So what do? As you know, I'm going to say therapy is very important. This was a really hard way to grow up. Many people who grew up with this not only had to manage the narcissistic abuse of the one parent, they may have also experienced neglect, abandonment, and felt really that all of that harmed you going into adulthood. Through that work, you may make decisions about what works for you. Some folks decide to detach from that detached parent themselves. Some gain more compassion for that parent's plight and offer up empathy. Some may have empathy but can't watch the toxic situation any longer. Only you know what fits right, and none are wrong. You may step in when that detached parent gets sick, but the ongoing of the observation of the situation can take a toll on you, and it's very unlikely that that parent will do things like get therapy, or certainly you asking them to leave will not only be a waste of breath, but also leave you feeling more depleted. The third scenario, the parent who enabled the narcissistic parent, all I can say is yikes. That's a no-win. There can be extreme anger on your part of having your parent be the one who basically emboldened the abusive narcissistic parent, and this may result in feelings of betrayal as well. This can make it really difficult to move forward. Some people may feel the need to tell the enabler the harm that they did, but in most cases they will not care and will just keep enabling, repeating the harm for you throughout your adulthood. You will frustrate yourself to no end if you try to open up this enabling parent's eyes. So this may be one where you learn to say, done, quit. You may actually like some aspects of the enabling parent. So perhaps if you do spend time with them, try not to talk about the narcissistic parent or have time-limited visits with them. So what do here? Figure out, if you want, how you can fit the enabling parent into your life. Again, only if you want. In some ways, such parents are completely impermeable, and not talking about your narcissistic parent is important, as it can be really exhausting to hear the enabling rhetoric again and again. Your enabling parent may be so trauma bonded and brainwashed that they don't even see what they're in, even though you can. Assuming that your parent, your enabling parent, is safe, They have sort of cast their hat in a ring, and it's not your job to maintain their delusion. Trying to communicate with them, with this group, most of all, is completely pointless. So again, don't exhaust yourself. Radical acceptance goes a long way here. And if you grew up in the two narcissist situation, I hope you have one hell of a shrink, because this may be one to walk away from. Make no mistake, on any given week, one of them may very well be likely trying to use you as supply or to triangulate. No need to go on a rescue mission here. Let them have each other and move into your own life. Because the situations of parents who stay in long-term narcissistic relationships are so varied, there is no one path forward for adult children. Many people exhaust themselves trying to encourage a parent to leave, and may find that over time they just can't bear to watch it anymore. Your parent will have to hit their own rock bottom, and may never hit their rock bottom, before they do that. And you, as their adult child, aren't likely to be the one to show them the way out. The feeling of frustration, disappointment, and anger at a parent who stayed in one of these relationships is to be expected, as is the grief, and ultimately, you aren't responsible for the decisions your parent makes about their marriage. You have enough trying to heal from growing up like that. So I hope this answers the questions of the many people say, what do I do as an adult child when I had a narcissistic parent and the other parent stays? It's a more common scenario than you think, and it can really create a heavy legacy for you in adulthood, where you still find yourself not only trying to do your own healing, but carrying the burden of still feeling that you owe something to that other parent. And just always, as I say, whenever I talk about healing, a reminder that this month, 25% off for the first month in my healing program. Use the code when you enroll, and there's details on that in the video notes. Thanks again.